Before we dive in, drop a quick hi in the comments. It may seem small, but trust me, it really helps YouTube share this story with more sci-fi fans like us. I'd love to see who's watching.
The plasma cutter screamed through 3 meters of glacial ice before the first trap detonated. Private Veth had been operating the breaching torch when the frost mine erupted beneath his boots. The charge itself was crude, a pressurized canister packed with ice crystals sharpened to molecular edges. But crude worked. The crystals shredded through his heated exosuit like shrapnel through cloth, and the cold did the rest. Veth was dead before he hit the ground, his blood freezing in arterial spurts that hung in the air like red glass. High Collector Morthus watched the body fall from 20 meters back. "Primitive ordnance," he said into his command channel. His voice carried the clipped precision of someone who had cataloged 100 species into extinction. "Mark the location. Continue breach protocol." Around him, the extraction team fanned out across the glacier face. 42 soldiers in Mark 7 thermal exosuits, the finest environment-sealed armor the Alliance of the Eternal Veil could manufacture. Each suit maintained a perfect 22 degrees Celsius internal temperature. Each soldier carried enough firepower to level a city block. They had deployed from the orbital station 3 hours ago with a simple mission: crack open the human settlement, round up specimens, extract biological samples. The containment grid had been in place for 3 centuries. The Wintermen were supposed to be primitives, starving, broken, begging for warmth. The empty longhouses said otherwise. Sergeant Keth was the first through the breach. His suit lights cut through the darkness of the ice cavern, illuminating a settlement carved from the glacier itself, walls of fused ice and salvaged hull plating, sleeping platforms lined with megafauna pelts, fire pits still warm with ash. "No humans." "Structure is abandoned," Keth reported. "Recent evacuation. They knew we were coming." High Collector Morthus stepped through the breach, his compound eyes scanning the cavern. The temperature readings inside his helmet flickered. Even through the suit's insulation, he could feel the cold pressing against him like something alive. "Impossible," he said. "Our approach was undetected. Scan for life signs." "Scanning," Keth paused. "Nothing within 300 meters. But sir, the storm is interfering with excuses." Morthus moved deeper into the settlement. His boots crunched on frost that had accumulated on the floor. They are primitives with primitive technology. They cannot evade Alliance sensors. Evidently, he was wrong. 600 meters away, buried in a snowdrift that had been shaped and hollowed over 17 hours, Kael Ragnarsson watched the Alliance soldiers stumble through his home. Their suits glowed on his thermal scope like embers in the dark. The heated armor made them visible for kilometers in any direction, a design flaw so profound it almost made him smile. Almost. His mechanical arm clicked as he adjusted his grip on the scope. The arm had been forged from the wreckage of the colony ship Winterblood, its hydraulics salvaged from cargo loaders, its joints wrapped in iceworm tendon to keep them from seizing in the cold. It was ugly, brutal, functional, like everything the Wintermen built. Around him, 9 scouts lay motionless in the snow. They had been in position for 6 hours, their body temperatures lowered through controlled breathing techniques passed down for generations. Their hides and furs blended with the terrain. Their heartbeats were slow enough to fool any scanner. Kael had given them one instruction: watch. Now he gave them another: mark targets. Wait for the vent. No acknowledgement. None needed. His people understood. Inside the settlement, Private Droon found the second trap. He had been searching a storage alcove when his boot caught a wire stretched across the entrance. The wire connected to a bladder of pressurized antifreeze harvested from native fauna. When the bladder ruptured, it sprayed directly into the seams of his armor. Antifreeze at -90 degrees Celsius does not behave like water. It seeps. It penetrates. It finds every microscopic gap in thermal sealing, and exploits it with chemical precision. Druin had 4 seconds to scream before his core temperature dropped below survival threshold. "Second casualty," Sergeant Keth reported. His voice was less steady now. "Booby trap. Chemical agent." "High Collector." Morthus did not respond immediately. He was standing in what appeared to be a communal hall, examining the walls. They were covered in markings. Not decorative. Functional. Maps. Patrol routes. Weather patterns. 3 centuries of accumulated survival knowledge etched into ice and bone. These were not primitives. "Pull back to the breach point," he ordered. "Defensive formation. We wait for reinforcements." "Sir, our orders." "I am aware of our orders." Morthus turned, his iridescent skin paling in the cold despite his suit's heating. "I am also aware that we have lost 2 soldiers to traps that should not exist in a primitive settlement. We consolidate. We reassess." The geothermal vent had been mapped by human scouts 18 months ago, a hairline fracture in the glacier running from a magma pocket deep below to a point 60 meters from the settlement's main entrance. The Wintermen had been waiting for the right moment to crack it open. This was the moment. 3 kilometers away, a human demo team triggered the shaped charges they had planted around the fracture's weak point. The explosion was small, controlled, precise. The vent was not. Steam erupted from the glacier with the force of a geyser, superheated vapor, 200 degrees Celsius at the source, blasting up through the ice and into the sub-zero atmosphere. The temperature differential was instant and catastrophic. Water vapor condensed and froze in microseconds. Moisture flooded into every exposed surface, every joint, every seam. Inside the settlement, the Alliance soldiers felt it before they understood it. Suit joints locked, servos seized. The perfect 22 degrees Celsius internal environment became a coffin as heating elements overloaded trying to compensate for the sudden thermal assault. 7 soldiers froze in place. Not dead. Worse. Alive inside locked armor, unable to move, watching through their visors as the steam cloud rolled through the cavern. High Collector Morthus was one of the lucky ones. His command suit had redundant heating systems. He could still move, but he could not stop what came next. They emerged from the steam like ghosts made of ice and spite. Kael Ragnarsson came first, 2 meters of cold-forged muscle wrapped in iceworm scales and salvaged hull plating. His mechanical arm swung a cold hammer, a massive maul with a cryogenic core that trailed vapor in the air. Behind him, his scouts materialized from nothing. 1 heartbeat, empty steam. The next, 9 figures moving with the silence of predators who had hunted in whiteout since birth. The first Alliance soldier died with an icicle shiv through his visor. The second died when Kael's hammer shattered his chest plate and flash froze the organs beneath. The third, fourth, and fifth died before they could raise their weapons. "Contact!" Sergeant Keth screamed into his comm. His rifle came up, tracking one of the shapes in the steam. He fired. Plasma bolt. The shape dropped. First, human death. His clan would sing his name tonight. But first, there was killing to finish. Keth fired again. Missed. Fired again. Another human fell, spinning into the steam with a chunk of their shoulder vaporized. Second human death. But for every human that fell, 5 Alliance soldiers died. They died frozen mid-stride as cold hammers found their joints. They died screaming as icicle shivs punched through the locked visors and into the soft tissue beneath. They died in the steam and the chaos, unable to see their killers until the killing was already done. High Collector Morthus retreated toward the breach point, firing his sidearm blindly into the white. His compound eyes could not track the movement. His suit's sensors were useless in the thermal chaos. He was blind and deaf and utterly unprepared for enemies who had turned this frozen hell into a weapon. "Orbital command!" he shouted into his comm. "Requesting immediate fire support. Coordinates, negative, High Collector." The voice from orbit was calm, clinical. The storm interference prevents targeting lock. No fire support available. Of course, the storm. The endless, screaming storm that had hidden this world's true nature for 300 years. "Fall back," Morthus ordered. "All units fall back to landing zone." The survivors obeyed. 14 soldiers out of 42, scrambling through the breach and into the howling blizzard beyond. They ran blindly, their suit lights cutting through snow that fell thick enough to choke on. Behind them, the Wintermen did not pursue. They did not need to. Kael stood in the ruined settlement, his hammer dripping frozen blood onto the ice floor. Around him, his surviving scouts checked the bodies. One of his scouts approached the frozen soldiers, icicle shiv in hand. "No," Kael said. The scout paused. "They will die anyway," Kael continued, his voice like grinding ice. "Let them watch. Let them understand what they woke up." He turned to the breach point, staring out into the storm where the surviving Alliance soldiers had fled. 300 years. 300 years as an example. A warning to the galaxy. They watched from orbit, through storms that never cleared, through fragmented glimpses of movement in the ice. They saw humans endure and assumed they were nothing more than primitives, animals clinging to survival in a frozen hell. They broadcast that assumption to billions as proof of what happened to those who resisted the eternal veil. And now they were coming to take them. An intercepted transmission, fragments pulled from Alliance channels, had made that clear. Capture the Wintermen. Study their adaptation. Extract what made them survive the cold for so long. Kael's mechanical arm clicked as he flexed the fingers. They had no idea what kind of survivors the humans had become. Aboard the orbital station, High Collector Morthus stood before the communication array, his exosuit still locked in places where the cold had damaged the joints. His iridescent skin had developed cracks along his cheekbones. Frostbite, even through the armor. "Report," said the voice from Alliance Central Command. Morthus swallowed. Resistance was heavier than anticipated. We lost 28 personnel in the initial contact, including 7 frozen alive, requesting reinforcements before proceeding. Silence on the channel. Then, reinforcements en route. 3 additional extraction teams. Enhanced thermal shielding. Morthus went still for a moment. "However," the voice continued, "the Kragthar Prime situation has escalated. The native species have destroyed 2 forward bases. Our troops cannot sustain operations in the volcanic environment. High Command requires Wintermen biological samples within 72 hours. Accelerate your timeline accordingly." The channel closed. Morthus stared at the blank screen. Then he turned to look out the viewport at Niflheim 9 below, a ball of ice and darkness, swirling with storms that never ended. 72 hours. He had just lost 2/3 of his team to primitives with hammers and traps. And now he had 72 hours to finish the job, while the Alliance bled out on another world entirely. The situation had just gotten much, much worse. The 3 dropships descended through the storm in perfect formation. Sub-Collector Voreth watched the landing zone approach on his tactical display, 90 soldiers ready in the holds behind him. Enhanced thermal shielding, mobile heating units, sonic deterrence. Every adaptation the Alliance could manufacture in 48 hours, rushed from the nearest sector fleet. Morthus had selected him for this operation because he was efficient, because he delivered results where others did not. He would not repeat Morthus's mistakes. "Landing in 30 seconds, the pilot announced. "Ground temperature -118, wind speed 200 kilometers, visibility 0. Voreth nodded. He had studied the after-action reports from the first extraction. Traps, ambush tactics, environment manipulation. The Wintermen fought like the planet itself, cold, patient, and utterly without mercy. But they were still primitives, still flesh and blood, still mortal. All units, Voreth broadcast to his teams. Tight formation on landing. Mobile heaters at center. No one advances beyond thermal coverage radius. We burn our path forward. Methodical. Controlled. No mistakes. The dropship touched down. The ramp dropped. 90 soldiers stepped onto Niflheim 9. The cold hit them like a physical wall. Even through the enhanced suits, Voreth felt it pressing against his skin. Hungry. Alive. He understood now why the original extraction had failed. This world did not want them here. But want was irrelevant. The alliance of the Eternal Veil had conquered 1,000 worlds. They had broken species that commanded gravity, that breathed plasma, that existed in dimensions humans could not perceive. They would break these frozen apes too. Forward, Voreth commanded. Burn everything. From 700 meters away, buried beneath a snowdrift, Kael Ragnarsson watched the plasma cutters ignite. They were learning. The tight formation eliminated ambush vectors. The mobile heating units created a bubble of warmth that would prevent suit seizures. The methodical advance left no traps unsprung. They simply burned through everything in their path, melting ice and triggering charges before they could be effective. Kael counted the soldiers. 90. Plus the 14 survivors from the first assault. Over 100 enemies, advancing in a configuration his standard tactics could not break. His mechanical arm clicked as he lowered the scope. They adapted, said Tormund, his second. The old scout had been raiding since before Kael was born. His face was a map of frostbite scars, his left eye milky from a hunting accident decades past. Faster than expected. Yes, the same tricks will not work. No. Tormund waited. The Wintermen did not waste words, but Kael's silences meant something. They meant calculation. They meant the gears behind those cold eyes were turning toward violence. The bacteria, Kael finally said. How long until deployment? 6 hours. The cultivators are seeding the upper atmosphere now. But the crystals need time to nucleate. If the sky clears before then, it will not clear. Kael stood, snow cascading from his furs. We give them 6 hours of hell. Then we give them something worse. He turned to the 12 scouts arrayed in the snowdrift behind him. Worm teams, full assault. Make them bleed for every step. Sub-Collector Voreth was directing the plasma teams when the ground exploded. Not with fire. With scale and muscle and fury. The ice worm burst from the snowpack like a leviathan breaching the surface of an ocean. 15 meters long, its body armored in overlapping scales that shimmered with crystalline frost. 6 legs, each ending in claws designed to grip glacier ice at terminal velocity. A head that was mostly jaw, filled with teeth that had evolved to crack megafauna bones. And on its back, 3 humans in scrap metal armor, holding on with one hand and swinging cold hammers with the other. The worm hit the formation's left flank like a battering ram made of hate. 4 soldiers died in the initial impact, not from the teeth or claws, from the sheer mass of the creature, 15 tons of apex predator, moving at 60 kilometers per hour. Their enhanced suits crumpled like paper. Their bodies painted the snow. "Sonic deterrence!" Voreth screamed. "Target that creature!" The deterrent units spun up. High-frequency sound waves designed to disrupt neural tissue. The worm shrieked, a sound like tearing metal, and veered away from the formation. But the humans on its back had already jumped off. They landed in the middle of the panicked soldiers, cold hammers swinging. One soldier's helmet shattered, his face flash freezing as the cryogenic core touched exposed flesh. Another took a hammer to the knee joint, collapsing as the metal seized solid. Plasma fire erupted. One of the humans twisted, taking a bolt through the chest. He fell without a sound. The other 2 kept fighting, kept killing, kept carving through the formation like wolves through sheep. Then they were gone, back into the storm, leaving 8 dead soldiers and chaos in their wake. "Reform!" Voreth bellowed. "Close ranks! Maintain heating coverage!" The formation tightened. The soldiers obeyed. Discipline held. But Voreth could see it in their movements now. The hesitation, the fear. These were not primitives. These were predators. 2 more worm strikes hit over the next hour. The second came from the right flank. Another 15-meter monster. Another 3 riders. Another 8 soldiers dead before the sonic deterrents drove it back. This time, the humans did not dismount. They rode the worm straight through the formation and out the other side, hammers crushing skulls as they passed. The third strike was different. It came from below. Voreth had not considered that the worms could burrow. The xenobiology reports mentioned nothing about subterranean capability. But the reports were 300 years old, based on orbital observation and automated drone footage. 300 years of evolution. 300 years of humans breeding these things for war. The worm erupted directly beneath a mobile heating unit, its jaws clamping around the generator and crushing it in a single bite. The thermal bubble collapsed. 20 soldiers suddenly found themselves exposed to minus 118 degrees Celsius with only standard shielding. 12 of them made it to the remaining heating units. 8 did not. Voreth watched them fall, watched their suits frost over, their movements slow, their vital signs flatline one by one. He could do nothing. The sonic deterrents were cycling. The worm was already gone, and his soldiers were dying in the cold. "Sub-collector." Sergeant Keth's voice crackled over the comm. He was one of the original survivors, the one who had killed 2 humans in the first assault. "We have lost 31 soldiers, including additional casualties after 3 out of 4 mobile heating units were destroyed. At current attrition rate, we will be combat ineffective within 2 hours. Voreth stared at the tactical display. The human settlement was still 4 kilometers away. 4 kilometers through this frozen nightmare, with creatures that struck from below and humans who treated death as an acceptable transaction cost. But Kragthar Prime was burning. The Alliance was losing a campaign because they could not adapt to extreme heat. And somewhere in these glaciers were biological samples that could change everything. "Continue advance," Voreth ordered. "Tighter formation. Remaining heating unit at center. We push through." "Sir, the casualties are acceptable." Voreth's voice was steady, cold, not cruel, certain. "We are the eternal veil. We have brought order to 1,000 worlds. We do not retreat from animals and their pets." He believed it. That was the tragedy. They reached the secondary settlement 2 hours later. 53 soldiers remained, 1 mobile heating unit, half their ammunition expended. But they had made it. Voreth stood before the settlement entrance, another glacier carved into living space, another monument to human stubbornness. His enhanced optics scanned the interior. Movement, life signs. "Contact," he reported. "Multiple signatures. Proceed with extraction protocol." The soldiers moved in, weapons ready, formation tight. What they found stopped them cold. Not warriors, not hunters, not the frost-hardened killers who had been bleeding them for hours. Children. The elderly, the wounded from the first assault, bandaged with strips of megafauna hide, lying on sleeping platforms carved from ice. Perhaps 30 humans in total, all of them watching the Alliance soldiers with eyes that held no fear, only patience. "Sir," Sergeant Keth's voice was uncertain, "these are non-combatants." Voreth moved through the settlement, his boots crunching on the frozen floor. A child, perhaps 8 years old, stared up at him with frost-blue eyes. The boy was missing 2 fingers on his left hand. Old wounds, healed clean. This world ate its young, and the young ate back. Our orders are to collect biological samples, Voreth said slowly. Not to slaughter civilians. You will take nothing. The voice came from an old man lying on one of the sleeping platforms. His chest was wrapped in bloody bandages. Plasma burn. One of the casualties from the first assault who had somehow survived. You will leave, the old man continued, his voice like wind over ice, or you will stay forever. Voreth frowned. You are in no position to threaten. The old man smiled. Then he closed his fist around the dead man's switch hidden beneath his furs. The charges had been placed throughout the settlement's structural supports. Kael had ordered them installed decades ago. Every Wintermen settlement had them, not for enemies, for mercy. If the cold took too many, if the food ran out, if survival became impossible, the survivors could choose a quick end over slow freezing. But they worked just as well for other purposes. The explosion was not large. It did not need to be. The charges cracked the glacier's internal architecture at precise stress points, and gravity did the rest. 100,000 tons of ice collapsed inward. The old man died instantly. So did the children. So did the wounded. They had known this was coming. They had volunteered. 26 Alliance soldiers died with them. Voreth survived because he was standing near the entrance. He was thrown backward by the shockwave, his enhanced suit absorbing the impact, his consciousness flickering as his head bounced off the ice. When he came to, the settlement was gone. A crater of shattered ice and buried bodies. His tactical display showed 47 remaining soldiers, huddled around the last mobile heating unit. 47, out of over 100, and they had not collected a single sample. Sub-Collector Voreth, report. High Collector Morthus's voice crackled over the orbital comm. Voreth stood at the edge of the crater, his damaged suit struggling to maintain temperature. Extraction failed, Voreth said. His voice was flat, hollow. Enemy employed scorched earth tactics. They killed their own civilians rather than allow capture. Current force strength is 47 combat effective. 1 mobile heating unit. Ammunition at 30%. Silence on the channel. Then, Kragthar Prime has fallen. Forward Command Base 3 was overrun 6 hours ago. The native species have adapted to our tactics faster than projected. High Command requires biological samples within 24 hours, or the campaign is classified as total loss. Voreth closed his compound eyes. 24 hours. 47 soldiers. A planet that killed everything that was not born to survive it. Sir, he said carefully, I recommend orbital bombardment. Precision strikes on known settlement locations. We recover samples from the remains. Negative. Bombardment would destroy the biological structures we require. The samples must be extracted from living or recently deceased subjects. Then we require significant reinforcement, division strength, full environmental warfare package. Unavailable. All available forces are committed to Kragthar Prime evacuation. Morthus paused. You have what you have, Sub-Collector. The Eternal Veil does not accept failure. The channel closed. Voreth stared at the frozen wasteland around him. The storm was beginning to thin. For the first time since landing, he could see more than 50 meters in any direction. Strange. The meteorological data suggested the storms never. The sky cracked open. Kael watched from the high ridge as the razor sleet descended. The bacteria had done their work. 6 hours of nucleation in the upper atmosphere, turning moisture into ice crystals harder than steel. When the storm cleared, the first clear window in 96 hours, the crystals fell. Terminal velocity. Billions of them. A rain of frozen knives. The Alliance soldiers had no cover. Their remaining heating unit could not protect them from physical impact. Their enhanced thermal shielding was designed for cold, not shrapnel. They died screaming. Voreth was one of the last to fall. His command suit held longer than the others, its reinforced plating deflecting the smaller crystals. He tried to run, tried to reach the crater to find shelter beneath the collapsed ice. A crystal the size of a fist punched through his faceplate. Kael watched the body drop. Then he raised the salvaged comm unit to his lips. Open channel. Every frequency the Alliance used. 300 years, he said, his voice like grinding ice. 300 years you watched us from orbit. Filmed us. Broadcast us to your empire as a warning. Proof of what happens to species that resist the veil. He paused. The razor sleet was thinning now. The bodies below looked like pincushions made of red ice. You wanted our biology. You wanted our adaptation. You wanted to harvest us for your war on some world we have never seen. His mechanical arm clicked. His lips cracked and bled in the wind. Here is our answer. You are not predators. You are not conquerors. You are soft things from warm worlds who thought you could survive the cold because you wrapped yourselves in metal. He smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. We are the cold. Come and learn. Aboard the orbital station, High Collector Morthus listened to the broadcast in silence. On one screen, the aftermath of Niflheim 9. Over 100 soldiers dead. No samples recovered. The extraction operation a total loss. On another screen, Kragthar Prime. Forward bases overrun. Troops in full retreat. The volcanic natives pressing their advantage with every passing hour. 2 fronts. 2 failures. And somewhere in the ice below, humans who had turned 3 centuries of imprisonment into 3 centuries of evolution. The eternal veil had made them a warning. They had made themselves a weapon. Morthus reached for the comm controls. He needed to report to High Command, needed to explain how everything had gone wrong. But his hand stopped before it touched the console. What could he possibly say? High Collector Morthus stood before the remaining crew of the orbital station. 30 faces stared back at him. Technicians, scientists, communications officers, data analysts. Not a single combat-trained soldier among them. Their compound eyes reflected fear, confusion, and the growing certainty that their commanding officer had lost his mind. Perhaps he had. The eternal veil does not accept failure, Morthus said. His voice was steady. His hands were not. Kragthar Prime has fallen. Our extraction teams are dead. High Command has made it clear. We return with biological samples, or we do not return at all. Silence. The hum of the station's life support systems filled the void. Sir. Chief Technician Drool stepped forward. His iridescent skin was pale with stress. We are not soldiers. We have no training for ground operations. The conditions down there are survivable. Morthus cut him off. We have thermal suits. We have weapons. And we have no choice. He turned to the viewport. Niflheim 9 rotated below, swaddled in eternal storms. Somewhere in that frozen hell, humans were waiting. Humans who had killed over 100 trained soldiers in less than 72 hours. Morthus knew the odds. He understood the mathematics of his decision. But mathematics did not matter anymore. Pride did. Legacy did. The knowledge that if he fled now, the eternal veil would make an example of him far worse than anything the Wintermen could devise. Load the dropship, he ordered. We descend in 1 hour. No one argued. No one volunteered. They simply obeyed, because obedience was all the eternal veil had ever taught them. Kael received the report from his northern scouts via signal lamp. 3 flashes. Pause. 2 flashes. Pause. 1 flash. Dropship descending. Final assault. He lowered his scope and turned to the war council assembled in the deep ice cavern. Clan leaders from across the glacier networks. Men and women who had survived this world for generations, who had lost family in the past 3 days, who had buried children in ice that would never thaw. "They come again," Kael said. "Not soldiers this time. Our scouts intercepted their communications. Technicians and scientists. The ones who watched us from orbit and took notes." Old Tormund spat onto the frozen floor. Desperation. They send lambs because they have no more wolves. Yes. So we slaughter them and be done. Kael shook his head slowly. His mechanical arm clicked as he flexed the fingers, a habit when he was thinking. "We do more than slaughter," he said. "We take their station. We take their broadcast equipment. For 300 years, they filmed us. Showed the galaxy what happens to species that resist the veil." He looked around the cavern, at the faces carved by cold and loss, at the warriors who had paid in blood for this moment. Now we show them something else. The dropship touched down in a valley between 2 glacier ridges. Morthus was first down the ramp, plasma pistol in hand. The cold hit him immediately, a physical force that made his joints ache despite the thermal suit. Around him, the technicians stumbled onto the ice, their movements clumsy in the unfamiliar suits as the wind tore at them instantly. Visibility was perhaps 30 meters. Snow fell in sheets. The storm had returned with renewed fury, as if the planet itself was hungry. "Form up," Morthus ordered. "Tight formation. We move toward the nearest settlement coordinates." They moved, 30 figures in thermal suits, clutching weapons they barely knew how to fire, walking into a frozen darkness that watched them with ancient patience. They made it 600 meters before the Wintermen appeared. There were no tricks this time, no traps, no worms bursting from below, just figures emerging from the snow, walking, unhurried. 20 of them at first, then 30, then more. They materialized from the whiteout like ghosts given flesh, wrapped in furs and scales and salvaged metal. Cold hammers rested on shoulders. Icicle shivs glinted in frozen hands. They did not charge. There was no need. Morthus raised his pistol. "Fire! All units, fire!" Plasma bolts cut through the snow, wild, panicked. The technicians had no training, no discipline. They fired at shadows and wind and fear. A few shots found targets. But for every human that dropped, 3 more emerged from the storm, and they kept walking. The first cold hammer fell on Chief Technician Drool. It shattered his helmet and froze his skull in the same instant. He collapsed without a sound, a statue of ice and horror. Then the killing began in earnest. Morthus ran. He did not remember making the decision. His legs simply moved, carrying him away from the screams and the wet crunch of hammers finding flesh. Behind him, his crew died. Not fighting, not resisting, simply being erased from existence by creatures who treated murder as maintenance. He made it perhaps 200 meters before he fell. His thermal suit had taken damage somewhere in the chaos. The heating element in his left leg had failed, and the limb was seizing up, joints freezing solid. He collapsed onto the ice, his plasma pistol spinning away into the snow. Footsteps crunched behind him. Morthus rolled onto his back. His compound eyes strained through the failing visor, trying to focus on the figure that loomed above him. Kael Ragnarsson stood in the snow, cold hammer in his mechanical hand. His beard was frozen into icicles. His lips were cracked and bleeding. His eyes held nothing. No anger. No satisfaction. No mercy. "Please," Morthus whispered. His voice was failing, his body shutting down in the freeze. "I was following orders. The Veil demanded samples. I had no choice." Kael stared down at him. "We did not ask for your war," Morthus continued, desperation cracking his voice. "Kragthar Prime, the volcanic species. That was not our decision. We are just instruments. Tools of the eternal Veil. You must understand." "I understand," Kael said. His voice was like grinding ice. Morthis felt a flicker of hope. Then you know I am not your enemy. The Veil, they are the ones who— You watched, Kael interrupted. From orbit, through storms that never cleared. You caught glimpses and decided that sooner or later we would perish. And you turned that into a warning for your empire. The hammer rose. You are all instruments, Kael continued. Every one of you. Tools that chose to be tools. Morthis opened his mouth to respond. The hammer fell. The orbital station was a skeleton, crewed by ghosts. Eric had never been in space before. He had never seen stars without a storm between him and the sky. When the captured dropship broke through the cloud cover and the void opened up around him, he gripped his seat restraint so hard his knuckles went white. Breathe, said Halvard, the team leader. Old warrior, missing half his left ear to a worm bite from 20 years past. The stars do not bite. They might, Eric muttered. The station grew in the viewport, a ring of metal and light, orbiting the frozen world like a vulture waiting for carrion. This was where they had watched from, where they had recorded and broadcast and laughed at the primitives below. Eric felt his fear transform into something colder. The docking was rough. The Alliance systems did not recognize the dropship's approach codes, but it did not matter. The skeleton crew had neither the training nor the weapons to resist. 8 Wintermen came through the airlock with icicle shivs and brutal efficiency. Station personnel died in the first moments of the breach, before most even understood what was happening. The rest surrendered. Eric did not participate in the fighting. His role was different. While Halvard's warriors secured the corridors, he moved toward the broadcast center, following directions memorized from salvaged Alliance technical manuals. The equipment was intact. The network connections were live. 300 years of propaganda flowing through these circuits, fragments of movement in the ice, distant figures in the storm, sent to billions across the galaxy as a warning. Eric sat before the controls, his hands steady in a whiteout, steady holding a cold hammer, steady gutting iceworm carcasses, trembled as he touched the alien console. Halvard, he called over the comm. I am in position, ready for broadcast. Do it, came the reply. Show them what we are. The footage began with fire. Alliance plasma cutters melting through glacier walls, soldiers in heated exosuits, weapons raised, advancing with the confidence of conquerors. The original breach, the beginning of the end. Then the frost mine detonated. Across the Alliance communication network, military channels, civilian broadcasts, governmental frequencies, the footage played, unedited, raw. Not the distant orbital feeds the Alliance had relied on for centuries, but human footage, close, immediate, and personal, captured from the ground. Soldiers dying as their suits seized in the cold, worms erupting from snowdrifts, riders swinging cold hammers, the settlement collapsing, burying invaders and defenders alike, razor sleet descending like the wrath of a frozen god, and the Wintermen, humans in scrap armor, charging through whiteouts, faces burned red by wind, beards frozen solid, eyes holding nothing but survival and spite. They chewed raw meat beside fires made of alien wreckage. They laughed as they shattered frozen helmets, as they pulled icicle shivs from Alliance throats. The footage showed bodies, Alliance bodies, frozen in poses of terror, stacked like cordwood outside settlement entrances. Children of the ice walking past without a second glance. It showed the old man triggering the dead man switch, the settlement collapsing, the choice to die rather than be taken. It showed Morthis on his knees, begging, and the hammer falling without hesitation. On Kragthar Prime, Alliance commanders watched their screens in horror. Their extraction operation had failed. Their samples would never arrive. The volcanic natives were pushing them back on every front. And now, Now they were watching the species they had dismissed as primitives execute their people with systematic brutality. On 100 worlds, Alliance citizens saw the exhibit for the first time as it truly was. Not broken savages, not frozen victims. Predators, forged by centuries of cold and spite into something the eternal veil could not categorize. Then Kael's voice came through the broadcast, relayed from the surface. He stood in the snow, comm unit in hand, the wind screaming around him. Behind him, his people gathered the dead. Human dead. Alliance dead. All of them would be buried in the ice, because waste was a sin on Niflheim 9. 300 years, Kael said. His voice carried across 1,000 frequencies. You found us here, crash-landed, refugees. You could have killed us. You could have helped us. Instead, you made us a warning. He paused. The storm howled. His mechanical arm clicked. His breath crystallized and shattered in the wind. Then you came for our blood, our biology. You thought 300 years of cold had broken us. A smile, cracked lips splitting, blood freezing on his chin. You were wrong. He looked up at the sky, at the stars he could not see through the storm, at the galaxy that was watching. We are not a warning anymore. We are not an exhibit. We are what you made us, and now you have to face it. The smile faded. Do not come back. Do not send others. Do not remember us except as a lesson. He lowered the comm unit. The cold does not forgive. It does not punish. It simply is. We learned to be the same. The broadcast ended. Silence fell across the Alliance network. On Kragthar Prime, the evacuation continued. Soldiers fled volcanic hellfire, their campaign in ruins, their biological salvation forever out of reach. In High Command, admirals stared at blank screens and tried to calculate how many species had just watched that broadcast. How many client worlds? How many subjugated populations? The Eternal Veil had built an empire on the perception of invincibility, on the certainty that resistance was futile. Niflheim 9 had just broadcast proof otherwise. On the ground, Tormund fell into step beside Kael. The old scout was limping, a plasma burn along his thigh that would scar badly. The broadcast went through, Tormund said. The entire network. They all saw. Kael nodded. What happens now? Kael stopped walking. He looked out at the glacier, at the ice that had been his people's prison and salvation for 3 centuries. The wind cut through his furs, familiar as breathing. Now, he said, we bury our dead. We repair what was broken. We teach our children what we learned. And the Alliance? Kael was silent for a moment. The storm screamed overhead. Snow fell like ash from a frozen sky. They will send others. Not soon. But eventually, someone will want revenge. Someone will want to prove they can succeed where these ones failed. He turned back toward the settlement, toward the fires burning in ice-carved halls, toward the survivors gathered around warmth they had earned with blood. When they come, Kael said, we will be here. We will always be here. He walked into the storm. Behind him, Tormund watched until the snow swallowed his war leader whole. Then he turned and followed, limping into the settlement where the living waited.
Hey there, space human. I'm really curious about your thoughts on this video. Drop a quick comment and let me know what's on your mind. Or just say hi if you prefer. Either way, I'd love to hear from you. Also, remember to check the pinned comment. Trust me, it's worth a look. Oh, and one last thing. I've chosen another video for you to watch. Just click the card here, or here if you want the whole playlist. See you there.